Welcome to another episode of the Next Generation Podcast. Today I have the amazing Thea Larsen on. And if you guys don't know who Thea is, she is the host of the Cowgirls Over Coffee podcast, an amazing advocate for agriculture, and just someone that is, whether you're a business person, a mom, whatever your realm is within agriculture, if you are a female within the space, Thea is an amazing coach and just motivational person. And I am so excited to have her on today. I'm not going to blab too much longer, Thea, because if I was given the opportunity, I could probably go on forever about just how amazing you are. So I'm just going to let you take it away. Share a little bit about yourself, who you are, and all the things.
Oh my gosh, well, thank you for the intro. I mean, you could go on. I will get a giant head if you keep talking about. I'm like, wow, what? But thank you, Lauren, for inviting me to come on. I love when we get to talk to other podcasters in this space. I just think it's so much fun, and I feel like I'm more agricultural advocate adjacent. Because it's so funny and I'll tell you how I came into this, and I feel so behind the agricultural ball because I grew up on a very it was nothing like where we live now. My husband and I ranch full time in the sandhills of Nebraska with a commercial cattle operation. But growing up, my grandparents had a section in northern Idaho, so we had horses and pulled Herefords. But I think we had maybe 60 or 80 head of pulled Herefords. Of course, as a kid, I thought this was I thought I was super cowgirl on the range. And then I came out here and I was like, what? And I have no background in animal science or anything like that. So my background is actually in business and communications. So it's really been fun to be in this space. And I've always lived the lifestyle. My first job out of college was with the New Mexico State Fair. But again, I was on the rodeo side and the marketing and the administration of things. So like I said, I always feel slightly adjacent or looking in. But I mean, there's no better way to live, right? It makes our job so easy as content creators too. Because I was like, oh, your photos are so beautiful. It's yeah, but it's 80% the life, right? It does look nice. But yeah, so I'm Thea. Cowgirls Over Coffee is my jam. I have a podcast. It started as an Instagram feed in 2015. And then in 2021, we opened up the membership, which is just a community for rural ranching, farming women who we always say simply refuse to settle. So there is no backing down. There is no good enough is good enough. And there's just so many women, and we are so far flung, and having the opportunity to come together in this membership where we're talking about personal development, business development, productivity. It's really about creating balance and being able to hold in tandem the daily demands, because this lifestyle is unique. I feel when you are in ranching and farming, and I know very little about farming, so just disclosure, I know next to nothing about farming. Mostly it's all ranching, but I know that we are all filling so many roles, multiple high demand roles, and I think that's really unique to us because we're usually mom, wife. We're usually handling some part of the administration of our operations. Plus, a lot of us have small businesses or content creation businesses. So filling all of those, we have to hold in tandem the daily demands of, I need to get something out of the freezer so we can have supper. And I also need to update the taxes or send in the 1099s, which are top of mind because I hate 1099 season. But all of that is happening at the same time. And I feel so many of us, when I was online, it started out as Instagram, and I was connecting with these other women, and we all feel we're failing. And it's just, master the mundane. Everything is okay, bring it back to the basics, do one thing at a time. No one's ever failing. No one's ever behind. We just are living in a time when we have these unique high demands, and being able to plan and control what we can control and be in community around that just makes it so much more manageable. That's the spiel I have.
Well, no, I think that spiel leads perfectly into kind of what we're going to talk about today. And
yes.
Just the whole topic and thought process of balancing our lives and what balance looks like. And especially for rural people within agriculture, all of those things, like we can't necessarily go look at someone who lives an inner city life that might have a 9 to 5 or something like that and be able to replicate that into our lives. Because
Absolutely.
the reality of it is our lives look very different every single day. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're on the ranch, like all of these different things, you have a plan. We like to keep to this plan, but that plan is probably going to go to shit 9 times out of 10.
Yes,
And
9.5.
exactly. And so I would just love to talk a little bit more about that. Like what really sparked you wanting to talk to women about, and just like people in agriculture, about balancing their lives and about like leveling up their lives while also like having all of these roles.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that come to mind. Like it's just like brain vomit all of a sudden. But I have to say the number one thing that brought me to this point is, so before this life, I always worked in executive administration. My last position previous to getting married, I was a general manager of the Greeley Stampede in Colorado. And I was used to like managing everything like you would a CEO. And that's how I approached everything. And you guys, I know that your audience can relate to this too. Like I've always been able to do more with less. Like I've always been an overachiever. And so when I made this whole 180-degree turn, I met my husband, we got married, I moved out to the ranch, I started doing consulting work instead of showing up to a 9 to 5. And everything was going really well until I had my first child in 2016, which was like the great equalizer. And so I remember a point when I was like laying on the floor in our house, like sobbing because I can't even look back on it now and even know what exactly was wrong. Like I just couldn't do any of the things. Like all of the things were just not happening. I was failing. I had never failed so hard in my life. And I was like, what is this? Who am I? I couldn't figure it out. And my husband was like, do you need me to do anything? And I had no answers. And I was like, no, just go feed. Like, I don't know like what to do. And that was when I realized, which it seems so obvious now that I'm so far away from it, because that was like 8 years ago, like applying the same strategies I had as a CEO, managing projects and things to my actual daily life. I had been compartmentalizing and thinking I could just wing it at my life, right? And because that was always what I was able to do, because I had like, until you hit your boundaries, like until you hit your capacity, you can wing it and get away with it because you have like this special octane where you just do more and can figure things out. Usually I find women that are in my space, like we are really good problem solvers. We're the go-to person, where they always see those memes where it's like, I girl boss too hard and now I'm in charge of everything. Like that is the kind of energy we bring to everything. But the one thing that I suck at is discipline and strategy when it comes to my own things. Now, I applied those when I was a CEO because you have to, because you're managing teams and it's money that's not yours and you're responsible for all of this stuff. When I finally flipped the script and I was like, I need some like serious routines for my life, and I need to like schedule when the laundry is going to get done, and I need to have a plan. And it's so funny because like inside of my heart, I am fundamentally opposed to planning and organization and routines because I'm just this little rebel at heart. And I feel like it doesn't count if I planned it. It's just, I can make all the excuses. But when I started doing those things and I realized how much easier everything felt, I always tell the gals and cowgirls over coffee, I'm like, I promise ease, not easy, because that's what you create. When you start getting more focused, when you're planning, like you said, your plans always go to shit. And like, that is so true in our lifestyle, right? Like the cows can be out, like there's 102 things off the board that can come at you that are not happening like in mainstream life. So I always say also like we plan so we can pivot. We don't plan because we expect those things to go according to plan. We plan so that we have primed ourselves. And this is like just the way our brain works and just the way strategy works. Once you think about, okay, what are my challenges going to be? How am I going to handle that? It's just like if you are an athlete, when you pregame and you visualize what's going to happen, then when your whole world falls apart and you're like, I have to take a horse to a vet, but I also have to pick up the kids at practice, and then we have homework to do. Like you've already know, okay, you can make decisions so much more quickly. You don't have that decision freeze or decision fatigue that happens because you planned ahead. So for me, that's where it all started, when I was like, okay, there has to be a better way. And for me, it became exciting because I looked at my life falling apart like it was a project. And I was like, okay, so how would I fix this? And the more I was talking about people organically, because I was just on Instagram, because I had gotten on Instagram in 2015 because I felt so alone. I was so alone. I'm an extroverted extrovert, and I moved to a town with like less than 100 people. And just the way I grew up in Northern Idaho. Right out of college, I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then Las Cruces, New Mexico, and then Fort Collins and Greeley, Colorado. So like my people were kind of spread all over the place, and I was just like this little like lonely. I just was so lonely, and I wanted to go do all the things. And so on Instagram, I started like, I don't know if we had DMs, but like even just connecting over comments. And I found out like everyone's feeling this way. So I was having these same conversations, especially with new moms, especially women who are filling operational and administrative roles in their ranches, plus small businesses, plus a lot of people who are consulting and doing that sort of thing. So yeah, I was like, okay, we can figure this out. And then I got excited about it because I love a good project. And I was like, we can figure this out. We had more conversations. And that's what led Cowgirls Over Coffee to become it. We started as the Cowgirl Diaries. And I never really wanted it to be about me. I just wanted to like put all the like cool stuff up there, but that's really not the way like branding works. It had to like be in front of it. Which yeah, that's where we went from the Cowgirl Diaries to Cowgirls Over Coffee. So it was more of a conversation. Then we had the membership open up, and then we also do like a business track side of the membership. So that's all happening. And then last year in November, or not last year, but last year in 2023 of November, we started the podcast. And that has just been so much fun because I get to have conversations with people like you. And like, we just have these streams of consciousness and everyone connecting over that. And we just all feel so much less alone. And I just love sharing our ideas because I firmly believe that there's no we always want to solve these problems by like, okay, check the box, right? Like, I just need to figure out productivity, or if I could just figure out a meal plan, or if I could just figure out my nap schedule, or whatever that is. And it's never those things because our lives are so symbiotic and all of these things are happening at once. And so having this all come together and approaching it that way, like where we all know, like there's a lot going on. And so it's about spinning all the plates and doing so, and, trying to handle what we can handle so that we can handle what we can't handle, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that makes perfect sense. But like, seriously, it is. I love how you said like life is so symbiotic. Like you can't just expect to like do this one thing and like master it perfectly while you have a million other fires going on. And
Yes.
it's one of those things that for me, it was also a time came where I was like, okay, I have no other choice. Like I have no other choice. I gotta figure this out. And it was just an overload. It was when I was in college and I was the college student that was taking 1,000,000 credit hours to like try and get done early. And I was also like, I was doing that remotely. I was working full time. I was doing all the things. I was starting my businesses, trying to figure out what those wanted to look like and meld and mesh and all of the things, and traveling full time, like doing all of these things. And it was like, okay, we got to figure something out, like even if it's not perfect. And I also relate to the fact that like I was like I knew I needed to do something but lacked the discipline to do it. I still like that's still an area that like I pray every single day like, Lord, please give me the discipline to get my ass out of bed on time, because
Yes.
guess what? I am my own boss, y'all. I could walk into my office at 10 a.m. if I wanted to, but I can't let that be a habit. And so I still lack discipline. It's still something we're working on. But for me, it was figuring out, and Thea and I were talking before we got on here of like how we both time block and how we like kind of schedule our days and stuff like that. And for me, it was like being super real with myself that like I don't trust myself to be able to sit down and actually get all the crap done that I need to get done if I don't have a plan. And there are days where it absolutely goes haywire, but I know my 3 majors. That's what I give myself every day. I give myself 3 majors, and those are the 3 things that I'm focusing on. If I get those done, it's a productive day. And then I obviously have my to-do list under that, and I have my time blocking and all of that stuff. But you know what? If I get a phone call saying like, hey, the cows are out, or hey, I need your help, or XYZ, I can go run and do that and still feel like I had an accomplishing day without like my plan being blown up, and then also feeling like my life is now blown up.
Yes, 100%. Well, and I think that's the really interesting piece is that I'm not sure it's like a chicken or the egg situation, but the women that I find living this lifestyle, I hate to even say like lack of discipline because I 100% lack discipline, but the stuff that we get rewarded for, the things that we get recognized for, like how hard we work, how we figure things out, how like just that visionary piece is the same thing that is diametrically opposed to being focused, staying on task, keeping things in silos. Like there's this like creative visionary thing that's happening that draws us to this lifestyle that makes us want to be entrepreneurs and do all the things, which I am here for. But like then we have to like manage ourselves, and it's almost like splitting my personality to be like Thea has to manage Thea. And I love how you're talking like I have my three majors, and I think this is such a good point. Listen to all of the people and all of the things and then try what works for you, because nothing is exactly the same. That's why I'm so against like, oh, here is my 5 point blueprint to, master your day, which is great. Like that's a starting off point, but feel free to, shift that. And that's where I think like having these conversations with your friends, like, hey, I tried X, this worked, this didn't. Well, hey, I kind of did something similar. Like, and that's why you can like get a planning system that works, get a time blocking system that works, or a task blocking, or you can only time block like 2 days a week. Like that's a whole, like there are no rules. And I think we start to think, okay, if I'm going to be disciplined and I'm going to get on top of things and I'm going to be focused and I'm going to be productive, then I must do X, Y, Z. And it has to be, we think of consistency like it's the same thing every day. And every time we sit down to make a plan, when we make a plan, we're thinking about the most ideal thing instead of just starting where you're at. Like we have to start exactly where we're at and figuring it out. And again, like I think we're so hard on ourselves too, because we'll get a system that's working and then it starts not working and we're like, oh, I'm failing. And I'm like, circumstances are just changing. It's never fixed. Like you are constantly dynamically changing, moving with the flow. And that's the key to it. That's where the ease comes in, is you kind of become like this athlete of navigating the circumstances and demands of your life. And that's how you start to feel in control of things. And that's where balance, like I 1,000%, because I've achieved it. Balance is achievable. Now that does not mean it's a point you get to and like you're like, I am now balanced. Like that's not the way it works. It's just like someone walking on a tightrope. You've got a long stick, it's coming out either way, you're putting one foot in front of the other, the wind blows and you have to adjust. We're always dynamically, navigating that balance, but it feels like you're in control because you have trained for it. Like you have trained for it. You have like the core strength, what the weight of your bar is as you're walking the tightrope. And like every once in a while, something's going to knock you off there, but you can get right back up again. And once you already have that skill set when you already have developed your skill set for creating that balance, it's easier to get back on track. It's not easy, and you're always going to come to overwhelmed, but maybe you're going to be overwhelmed less, and you're going to be burnt out a whole lot less. But that's why I love conversations like you're saying, hey, this is how I do it. This is what I learned how to do. Like all of it is just a skill. All of it is changing. There's no one and done. I get super excited about it because I'm like, tell me all your problems, tell me all your dreams. Let's figure it all out. Let's put it on paper.
No, absolutely. Well, I love what you said there too, of just the fact that like it creates, like it takes you training that muscle. It takes you practicing. It takes you like, it's not just like we've made it. Like I now have achieved balance and I don't have to do anything and I never have to adjust.
I'm so aspirational.
Yes, exactly. And I think I can relate to that too, because it's one of those aspects that for me, it took a lot of trial and error of like trying all of the things and then being like, okay, none of that worked, but like, I kind of like this stuff. And I think every single person is going to have their things that they're going to have to like pick from the candy basket, their favorite candies that they like and that work for their life and their lifestyle and stuff like that. Because your personality, your lifestyle, your job, like all of these things are going to impact how you achieve balance or what balance looks like for you. And balance for Thea and I probably looks very different than balance for like my husband or your husband or like anyone else that are in our lives or other achievers that we know. Like balance is going to look different for every single person, because for me, balance like feels different than it does for my best friend.
Yes.
And that's okay. It's a really great opportunity to like be able to sit down and have those conversations with your friends and with people around you. Be like, hey, this is what's worked for me. Not saying it's going to like work for you, but like, hey, this is what I'm trying, this is what we're doing, like all of these sorts of things to just try and get yourself to a point of like, like I feel
Exactly.
good. I feel good about my life. I feel good about my work. I feel good about what I'm doing. And you know what? It's not perfect, but like you said, we're on that tightrope and we're balancing, and that core strength is there, and we're getting there.
I think I love all of that because I think as the kind of women that we think there's a right answer and we're not getting it. And I think that's the biggest obstacle and the biggest villain in most of our stories is we think there's a right answer. And there just isn't a right answer. There's just this constantly moving goal line, which is great. When you know there's no right answer, it's not, and also, oh, I hate things like good enough is good enough. No, like that makes my skin crawl. Good enough is not good enough. But what I like to say is my best until I can do better. Because sometimes my best in some seasons, my best is like making sure I get out of bed and brush my teeth, right? Because life is constantly evolving and we don't know what it's going to throw at us. But my best until I can do better. And I think that helps us take out the core piece of us that wants to do the right thing and have the right answer. And I really don't think anyone is, striving for perfectionism. We know that's not possible. I don't think anyone is glorifying being busy. There's so many of these things that are so dismissive to the actual life experience. It makes me a little bit angry, to be honest. I always say, like, I'm not as nice as I sound online. Like, I internally dialogue, I'm like, no, because it's just like life is hard, circumstances are hard, this is difficult, it is challenging, and that's okay. Like, things can be super hard and I can still move through them and not judge myself and come from a place of neutrality. But I'm not going to be like, oh, don't wear busy as a badge of honor. You are freaking busy. You are busy. When you have more things to do in your day than you can possibly get done. I can tell you that. I know that for a fact. So it's okay to be like, I'm busy and I'm saying I'm going to do this and I'm not going to do that. And every day, like, your priorities are not 1, 2, and 3. Like, today they shuffle. Today 1 is 1, tomorrow 6 is 1. And that's what you have to give yourself permission to do. And that's where the balance comes from. And that's where you start to see like an improvement. I feel like that's where we streamline. That's where we improve our efficiency and our productivity in the way that we feel. Like, I loved how you said, like, that's not what balance for me doesn't feel the same as it will feel for my best friend. Exactly. Which is like when we realize there's no right answer, but our job is to figure out our right answer. I mean, all of a sudden, like, you just changed the whole game.
Yeah, you absolutely did. Can you, if there's people listening to this that are like, okay, my life is a hot mess express disaster right now, or they're just like, I'm juggling a million things, what are like your kind of like first steps that you tell people, or maybe just like your pieces of advice figuring it out themselves type of thing?
Absolutely. So my very first piece of advice, and actually I will get you a link to this. I have a reset workbook and I'll get you a link. So whoever's listening to it, they can get it for completely for free. But the first thing you have to do is take responsibility and be like, I'm going to figure this out. Not just like, I want someone to figure this out for me. I want to read a book and get the answer. You have to say, I'm going to figure this out. And then you have to get yourself to a quiet place, which I know is sometimes an achievement in and of itself, and sit down and write down everything that's on your mind. Like, every single thing that you can think of that comes to mind, write it down. I call this all the things, like all the things out on paper, anything that's like been eating at you, whatever, because our brains were not meant to hold things. Our brains are meant to process and problem solve and create. They're not meant to hold things. So when we have all these worries in our head, and it's not just worries and it's not just anxiety, it's all the things that you do need to get done. And I think that's another place where we can be dismissive. It's like, oh, you only have time for what you make time for. Decisions have to be made. You have more things to do and they are your responsibilities. So get them on paper. And then you look at those and you need to evaluate every single thing. And this is kind of a take on a prioritization matrix. You have to decide what of these things are urgent, what is not urgent, and what of these things is impactful and what of these things is not impactful. And from there, you can delegate, defer, or dismiss. And you can decide, okay, this is really urgent and it's got to be done by me and it's important to me, it's a high impact, so we're going to do it. Defer is, it's urgent, but I don't need to be the person doing it. So I'm going to defer it, I'm going to delegate it. The other thing is, this is not urgent, but it is important. Defer. So schedule it for later. And that doesn't mean like I'm so against working off lists, like schedule it for later and you keep your list to come back for later. And there's some things that are not urgent and they're not impactful. And we just think we're supposed to do them, whether it's a societal expectation or expectation from our family or friends or whatever. And you can dismiss it. And the reason that this is so important in getting started, I feel, is that now you're not making a decision about, say you have 100 things in your mind and they keep coming back and cycling back. And so you're making a decision about, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? Am I going to do this? Am I not going to do it? And so you're deciding, no, I'm not going to do it. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, I really think I should do it. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, maybe I should do it. Maybe I'll look into doing it. By putting it on paper, even though it takes time to sit down and do it, you've made the decision. So when it does pop back up, you can be like, I decided I'm not going to do that. And pretty soon it will quit cycling back through. So that's my very first exercise that I always say, like, if you're like, wow, everything's a mess, you've got to do that reset and just be like, everything down on paper, what's important. And then you pick like 3 things at a time. I'm going to tackle these. And it's okay. I think sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission to say, actually, getting content done for the business is going to take priority over washing laundry today. So laundry is going to wait for 3 days. I'm going to finish this project and then we're going to take care of the laundry. And we also take like the shame out of it, and the judgment of ourselves is like, I had to choose. I had a choice and that's the choice I made. And then the next day, laundry is going to be important. And then all the other emails are going to have to wait. I'm not going to check socials. I'm not going to answer emails. And when you start doing that and you start making those decisions deliberately, that's, I feel, the framework and the foundation of understanding what the cadence of your days are going to look like. And that's when you can start thinking about, do I want a time block? Do I want a task day? Do I want to do all of these productivity strategies? Because you'll start to get a feeling for how things ebb and flow. And then just knowing that there's no one right answer. And because I feel like that trips us up so many times when we're like, we read about time blocking, we're like, yes, this sounds perfect. Or whatever strategy. I'm going to make this strategy. I'm going to do it. And then we try to fit our life into the strategy instead of letting our life inform what our strategy is going to look like. So that would be kind of where I would start. Get that list down, figure out what's important, prioritize, choose the first 3 things, and then start seeing how that information about how your life is flowing right now, let that inform the productivity or planning or whatever strategies you want to implement. And you do need those strategies and you do need practices. And I think that's the other thing is we think, oh, I'll just walk in the grocery store. I'll just wing it. I'll just walk in and I'll buy whatever I need. And that does work for a while. It works for a while until it doesn't. And then once you implement a practice where you're like, I am going to make a list and I'm going to go into the grocery store with my list, all of a sudden it takes less time to go to the grocery store. You're less stressed about going to the grocery store. You have less waste when you go to the grocery store. And you're like, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I? Because you weren't ready, and it's fine. It's totally fine because you had to get to the place where you can start implementing those strategies.
I love what you said about, like, I loved everything that you just said,
you.
first of all. But I love what you said about the fact that, like, you can't look at all of these strategies and then, like, shove your life into one of the boxes. You have to, like, look at all of these strategies and, like, bring them into your life because your life is going to be ebb and flowing all the time. Life is going to look very different every single day, every single week, every single month. Like, my life looks very, 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 very different this year than it did last year. Like, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. The fact that, like, life looks different, and that's okay. And everyone's day is going to look different. Everyone's schedule is going to look different. Everyone's strategies are going to look different. But, like, it's the act of finding something that works for you and, like, sticking to it and building that muscle. I think that so often we get in this analysis paralysis sector of life of, like, looking at all of the things of, like, oh, okay, I can task block, I can time block, I can prioritize days, like, I can do top 3, like, I can do and then you don't do any of them, and you don't try a single one, or you try all of them at once, which is a terrible idea. Speaking from someone that, like, tried to do that once.
The thing that we did, we're like, I'll do all of it. Why would I do part of it?
Yes, exactly. And so, like, then you're just stuck, and then you, like, get so overwhelmed that you don't end up doing any of it. And then that's not productive for anyone. And you probably just ran yourself through a hell week.
And everyone around
Honestly.
you.
Yes, exactly. For yourself and everyone in your household and
Yes.
everything like that. And it's the fact that like I love, love, love what you said about like finding something and then building that muscle. And it's the fact that like you're not going to be able to walk out onto that tightrope with your balance beam the first time and stay on without having to use like your safety harness that you've got on you to like bring you back. And that's okay. Like that is okay. It will take a lot of time, a lot of training, a lot of like just some of that discipline, bringing that in and
Mhm.
like just figuring it out. And it's not fun, it's uncomfortable. It is like not necessarily an enjoyable thing to go through all the time, but that's what growth is. Growth is not enjoyable. Growth is getting out of your comfort zone. Growth is taking those lists and taking all of those things and saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to be the same that I was last week. I'm not going to be the same person that I was last year. I'm going to be better. I'm going to grow bigger. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone and I'm going to try new things. And you know what? If they don't work, that's okay. And it's okay to not do it perfectly or have it all figured out or to in 3 months change your mind and be like, that's actually not working. We're going to try something else. But at least you're trying and at least you're implementing things. And at least you're looking at your life and saying, I'm taking control of this. Like, I am not going to let life control me. I am now going to control my life.
1000%. Yes. I'm just like, preach. Yes. I think that's the biggest thing is, I'm trying to think how to say this. You like strategize and never settle, because I think we get stuck in this point where like we do try all those things. Like we take the 6 steps to your perfect day, from the Amazon influencer, and we're like, okay, I can do this. Like maybe only 3 of those. Take 3 and see how they work. But like strategize, but you don't have to settle. You do not have to settle. You do not have to compromise. You don't have to. Is it going to be harder? Yeah. If you want to do 3 things, it's going to be harder than if you want to do 1 thing. And if you want to do 9 things, it's going to be harder than if you wanted to do 3 things. And you get to choose that, because I think a lot of us like thrive on the challenge of that. And it's just like not everybody is going to be like 100-mile marathon runner, right? But the people who love it, love it. They love it for the 100-mile run. And that's cool. And that can be good for one person and not for another. And I want everyone to know that you don't have to compromise away. Like that whole feeling that, oh, something's got to give. It doesn't. And I think that's what I hate when people say like, you can't do all the things. No one wants to actually do all of the things. Like most of us have like 3 to 5 things that are really important to us. We can absolutely find a way to prioritize and manage in a comfortable, balanced, disciplined way, doing 3 to 5 things. Like you can be a mom and own a business, and like, but you have to set yourself up to know like, when are you going to set one thing down and work on another and find the strategy that works for you. I always say like 0 judgment, but 100% responsibility. And I think that's a really comfortable place to come from when you're approaching all of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I heard it was in relation to entrepreneurship and having a business and then also being a mom. And it was
Mm-hmm.
from Sadie Robertson, who heard it from someone, I think. And she said that she was like, when she had her first baby and made the decision that she was going to keep working and be a working mom, she got told that make that decision and stick with it and be proud of that decision. Don't be in a situation where you're like, I feel bad or I feel guilty. Like, no, you get to come home to your baby and you get to be like, guess what I did today? Guess what? Look at all of these amazing things I did today, rather than come home to your baby and be like, I'm sorry I wasn't here. You get to make that decision. And I think that like I have taken that. I am not a mom yet. I have taken that and kind of like meshed it into my own life of like, no, I get to be in these situations and be excited and be proud and be happy about what I'm doing. And like look at my days and look at my life and just my overall contentment of like just how I feel about my businesses and different things like that and our growth structures and all the things, and look at it and be like, I am excited and I'm proud of these decisions. I'm not feeling guilty about these decisions, because you know what? The reality of it is what we're talking about, of like what Thea said earlier about like you're not going to do laundry for 3 days. That's the reality of it. Like sometimes you're in a growth season and laundry just doesn't get done. Or you know what? You had to go to the grocery store. And this week I bought a bunch of packaged salad things, knowing dang well that are they the healthiest thing for me? And are there a lot of calories in those like whatever sauce packet things that are in there? Absolutely. But I need convenience and I need something that is going to work for my life in the season that we are in right now. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I am going to look at it and be like, you know what? I'm happy with that. It's what we're getting this week, and I'm gonna stick to that because if I put myself in a guilt trap, like who in the hell is that helping? Like, it's not making me feel better, and it's not making
Yes.
anyone around me feel any better either.
Well, and that's why I love, like, I just like this is my best until I can do better. And I'm fully aware that I'm not comfortable with this. Like, this is a mediocre solution and I'm not okay with it, but this is what I'm owning right now. And I love, and the same thing, like first of all, motherhood is like the great equalizer. I always tell people, like, don't ask me about like new motherhood because it completely destroyed me. Like, I had to start over from scratch. Like, it came out of left field. I had no idea. I have all the thoughts on it now. But for me too, like I was all career 100% 24/7, as evidenced by my poor judgment in my personal life. But when I did get married and we decided to have kids, I remember even telling my husband, I was like, being a mom isn't going to be the only thing I do. It's just going to be one of the things I do. And then when we had Oliver, I was like, well, wait a minute. This is actually really important. Like, it came out of nowhere how important it was to me. And then also my oldest son is on the autism spectrum, so we have an extra set of demands. And I knew that I wanted to do what I could. I love to create, I love to connect, I love like figuring things out. But I knew like CEO, like also where I am in the Sandhills of Nebraska, there's not a lot of like CEO positions available. But I was like, this is going to be off the table for a while because I'm not willing to make like, and owning that. I love, like, you don't have to be guilty about it, but you also get to change your mind. And all of like, this is just a season. And I feel like the word season gets overused so much, but really like looking at like newborn season to when preschooler, and now both of my kids, this is the first year that they've both been in like school. This is the first time in 8 years where I've had 7 hours 4 days a week to myself to do work. And I love, like, I would workaholic so fast, like I can fall right back into it. Like I am just programmed to like make the widgets. So but because I put this structure around, I was like, okay, this is really important to me now. This whole motherhood thing is very important to me. So I had to create something that would work for it. Like I had to create Cowgirls Over Coffee in a way that it would work for our lives. And that's great. Like, and there's no right answer. There's not even a right answer for you. There's just this is right now. And being in that space and just being really agile in the way that you're managing all of the things, that's the best thing you can do for yourself. Like I said, become just a high performance athlete of your life. And then you're going to be making those decisions. You're going to be more confident in them. The daily demands you're going to feel like with more ease, because I see so many women with small businesses, and I'm here. If you want to build an empire, or if you just want to sell your crafts on Etsy once a week, like I'm here for either dream. I love it. But 9 times out of 10, if your business isn't working, it's because your life isn't working. And like, it is the foundational stuff. Like, are you getting enough sleep? Did you sit down and look at your calendar? Do you have an ongoing to-do list, or do you put things on a schedule? Like all that boring crap. Like, I don't want to do it either. I think it's boring. And I think I don't have time to sit down for 10. Yes, you do. You 1,000% do, because you're going to make it up. Like, there is a huge ROI on maintaining your foundations and taking the time to make the plan. And that is going to serve you. Like, you do not need a new Instagram strategy. You need to make sure your laundry is done. Like that is, I promise you, the mental load of just leaving your laundry to pile forever. Again, from time to time, we have those times, right? But you need to have a strategy in place to take that mental load. It's just ambient stress, and it's killing you, and it's killing your business.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All of that. Yes, absolutely. And
So
it's like, it is like all of the noise in the background, like you got to take care of it. It's one of those things that like, we can't just ignore it until it becomes debilitating. And then you're like, oh, I guess I'll go take care of it finally. And then like you have 5 loads of laundry to do instead of maybe the one. that you could
Yeah.
have just like thrown that 10 minutes aside and done then. And you know what? There are phases of life where all of that is going to ebb and flow. And maybe for your business, it's like, for me, I have all the dump lists, all the lists, all the things. You guys know how crazy I am with my lists and all this
Everyone
stuff.
loves a good
But it's
list.
but it's like I'm looking at that list every single week when we're planning. I'm not just going and dumping things on the list and then being like, if something has been on the list for like more than, I don't know, 6 months to a year and I haven't done a single thing towards it, it probably just needs to be deleted off the list, or I need to find someone else to go do that. Like,
Yes.
because the reality of it is if I'm looking at that list every single week and I'm planning out my weeks and doing all of the things, that like, and I'm not doing certain things, they either need to get delegated or like cut off. And it's one of those things that it was really hard to get to that point. It was really hard to start setting those boundaries for myself and for my business, and as a work from home person, of like being able to like get up and like go to the laundry, but also need to sit my ass in the chair and like get some work done too, and like do some consulting calls and like do some other things. And then also like a big thing for me was not just doing like the ASAP things, not doing things like that. I know that the deadline is this week, so I'm going to do them this week. Like actually getting my crap together. And it's crazy how like for me, time blocking and scheduling things out and like looking into the future a little bit on like my deadlines and all that stuff that I have coming up, it's crazy how much more I get done unless I procrastinate when I actually sit down and I'm honest with myself on like, okay, what's this week look like? And then giving myself space for things to ebb and flow, because you know what? I'm probably going to time block my week. And then 2 days in, I'm going to look at that time block and be like, yeah, because that happened.
Yeah.
And we're going to try again and we're going to start over and we're going to keep building that muscle. And eventually things will start falling into place. And but
Yes.
I hate it when people are just like, oh, it's going to fall into place. No, like it's going to fall into place because you're working for it to fall into place. It's not just going to
Yes.
fall into place because like you threw up your hands and you're like, well, Jesus, take the wheel. Have fun. Good luck.
Right? 1,000%. I know, I always think about it like, I don't know if you ride at all, but like with our Colts, anytime we're trying to get them to do a pivot or a spin, it feels like such a mess until all of a sudden it's just not a mess. But you have to keep like, you start slow and you go slow forever and ever and ever. And then all of a sudden, like it just turns into this like fast spin and it feels like clockwork. It didn't just go out there and feel like clockwork. And if you rush it, it's never gonna feel like clockwork. But it's like you just have to keep coming back and keep, 1 foot over the other. And I feel like that just applies to so many things. And if we can just release our expectations, like release your expectations, mitigate the resentment, keep showing up. There's not a right answer. Like you will get there. If you're doing the work, it's kind of like when they say, if you worry that you might be a narcissist, then you're not a narcissist. I feel the same way. Like as long as you keep showing up and doing the work, and doing it in a thoughtful way, and you're really trying, it's going to come together. It will come together because you're going to either figure out it's going to work out or you figure out it doesn't work. And then we move on to the next thing. And just having like a lot less expectations and resentment, they have to go out the door, and then things will start coming together.
Oh, I love that. Like expectations and resentment. And I think that we need to like put that on ourselves, but then also like on other people in our lives too.
1,000%.
Like that is a universal, just like all the things. This is like a little bit off topic, but not really. When my husband and I were going through our premarital counseling before we got married, that was one of the biggest things that they said was like most all fights in marriages start because expectations from one spouse or one person weren't being met and weren't communicated. And it like absolutely shook my world of like, oh my gosh, like just like connecting it. Like Wathan and I had always kind of like had that mindset on things like communication and all of this stuff, but then like actually connecting that of like, oh, okay. So, but then for me, how I applied it to the rest of my life was like, I need to have good expectations for myself and be able, but like not expectations that are unhealthy. The unhealthy expectations, they have to go. Like they need to find their way out the door right now. And then like if I do have expectations for a employee, for a like marketing client or things like that, clearly communicating those and not saying
Mm-hmm.
like, these are my expectations and you have to adhere to them. Saying like, you can very politely explain that like, hey, this is how I run my business and this is how I see this partnership working. And then it's an amazing conversation that comes from that. And I think that like a lot of balance and balance in life comes from having those conversations and being honest with not only yourself, but being honest with the people that are around you. Because the reality of it is, as a very high achiever, I can't do everything. And that was really hard for me to come to.
Yeah.
That like, I can't do it all. I can't be the perfect stay-at-home wife and run 3 businesses. Like it's not possible. I'm not going to be doing any of them well if I'm trying to do all of them. And for me, it was relinquishing control of things and asking for help. Like asking my husband if he could do the laundry. And you know what? That was the best thing ever because he loves to have his shirts folded a certain way. And I just never could achieve that. So you know what? It was the best compromise that now my husband does the laundry 9 times out of 10. I still help and stuff like that. But leaning on the people around you, I think, is so huge with balance in just your life because we can't do it all. Even though we wish that we could, we can't.
Well, and I love what you said about like, I can't do it all and do it well. And I'm like, that's what you get. Like, I think we forget that we get to decide what doing it all means. Like, there's some things that you can choose to be like, I don't care if I'm the greatest cook. Like, I can cook well enough that it's all right. And there's other things where you're like, I want to be the best in class at this. Like, I want to be the best in class in my business or in my parenting or in my marriage or as a friend or at school or whatever it is. And then there's other things where you're like, you know what? Like, I don't care. Like right now, my youngest just started wrestling and I realized like, I really don't care about wrestling. I was like, I'm here to be like the cheering sports mom, not like the yelling at people sports mom, but like, I love the cheering, but wrestling, you know what? I'm taking him because he loves it, but I don't care. Like, I was like, there's all this stuff happening. I'm like, meh. So like, that's not taking up a lot of my headspace. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing, like as I go along and you're going to find like right now, where's my capacity at for each of these things? Like if you want to do like, some, like maybe you want a part-time job and you just show up like, and that's all, like you're meeting the requirements, like that's okay, and you're like going hard at something else. The same thing if you have a full-time job and you got to show up with 110%, but you also want to start a business on the side, you're going to be cool with 20%. Like do 20, put yourself at a level of 20%, and we get to define what all the things looks like. And it's not just like I'm doing 1 through 10. It's like I'm doing 1 at 80%. I'm doing 2 at 10%. I'm doing 3 at 110%. Like that's all. Everything is up to you. Everything is at your discretion. You just have to decide what that is and then come from a place of neutrality and keep working on it.
I like what you just said about coming from a place of neutrality. Can you talk a little bit more about that and kind of like taking off those rose-colored glasses and almost like analyzing yourself and your life as if it, like you kind of said earlier, of like Thea having to boss Thea around?
Yes. Well, and like there's a great book, and I'll have to find out what it is, by Trevor Moawad, and he passed away, but he was like a sports performance coach for like NFL football teams. And that was the first book where I read about this neutrality concept. And it's like, if you just take all of the weights, like good, bad, this is expectations, resentments, pride, shame, all of those things. If you take them out of the equation and you start looking at things and yourself from a place of neutrality, if you look at your relationships from a place of neutrality, your to-do list from a place of neutrality, your expectations on yourself, it's just like when you hear, I'm sure there's memes that are like, you celebrate the successes with the same amount of weight that you like take the losses. Like the successes and the loss, like you got to come from a place. Like don't get too excited about the wins. Don't get too sad about the losses. Don't get too excited about the great feedback. Like you have to come from a place like in the middle is where you actually are. And I think that just takes a lot of the pressure off, because you're like, when you make a decision, I think I really see this in decision making. Like we put so much weight on ourselves when we make a decision. We spend way too much time making the decision. And then when we make the decision, we don't put enough time into like the follow through on it. Right. And so Like, make the decision, see what happens, and make the next decision. You're better off making more decisions. Like, I want to do this. Nope, I did it and it didn't work out. I'm going to do this other thing. Nope, I didn't know that was going to go this direction. That is going to get you so much farther, and you're going to feel so much better than if you like spend 6 years making a single decision. And then once you've made it, like, you're committed and you're all in and you have to do it because you've already spent 6 years making this decision. That's where I think neutrality really serves you, because you're just taking out all that extraneous stuff and you're just moving from moment to moment.
Ooh, that was good.
Well, thank
I like
you.
that.
I tend to
I like
ramble,
that.
so I'm glad when I hit a point.
No, that was good. I really like that because it's one of those things that I feel like so often, for me personally, especially like if I'm coming up on a big business decision or stuff like that, like I'm like, I gotta take a step back. Like, I gotta take a step back. I gotta take my like glasses off. I gotta take the emotion out of it, and I gotta be like super analytical about it. And I have to come from that place of neutrality. And I have to come from that place of like, if I was an outside like consulting business person coming in to like one of my businesses and helping me consult on a decision, what would I say? What would I evaluate from this certain situation? What are the pros? What are the cons? Like all of these things, and come from that place of neutrality. And I think that that goes right into like defining your life and defining like what works for you, and defining what motivates you and what balance looks like for you, and all of these things of like, I love where we were at earlier of like dump it all down and then take a step back and come from that place of neutrality of like, okay, like I gotta be real with myself for a second. Like, and it's not gonna be fun. I got to like be so hyper honest and like allow yourself to be honest with yourself. Because I think so often we're not necessarily lying to the other people in our lives, we're lying to ourselves on like what we can do or what we like to do or what we enjoy or what I'm doing because I want to please my parents or Betty down the street, or what I like, all of these things of you're just not being real with yourself. And I think that a lot of it starts there of just throw it all down, and then you got to get real honest and get real uncomfortable and not have fun for a couple hours
Right?
of like
Yes.
evaluating your life and being like, well, shit.
Well, and it's so, yeah, and it's like we just spend, like, we put way too much meaning behind things. And I think that's where we end up tripping ourselves up too. And I think we sometimes get, it upside down in that we neglect the mundane things, and really it's those mundane things done over time that have a compound effect. And those are the things that we tend to naturally want to neglect, and we want to really like, we want to make big bold moves and make big decisions. And if we just can see everything on an equal plane and not weight some things more than others, and realize that most of these decisions we can change our mind about. Most of our tasks we can do one task, and then if it doesn't get done, is it the end of the world? Maybe not. And just owning the fact that we can change and we can decide again, and doing so deliberately, and making sure you're coming from a place where you are making deliberate decisions and you're not just being flaky, because that's the other side of it too. Like if you're so flippant, you're like, I'll do this, I'll do that. That's just as bad, right? Like if you don't have a care in the world, that's just as bad. So as long as I said, like, as long as you're owning and doing the work, like I said, again, all 100% responsibility, 0% judgment. If you're operating from that place in neutrality, that's how you're going to get through, like, do I do this? Do I not do this? Let's just try it and see, or not try it and see, either way, and then go from there. So be deliberate and don't be flaky, but there's so many things that we're just putting way too much pressure on ourselves about.
I think that like probably relates to everyone's lives of like, they can probably sit down and be like, yeah, I like took on that task or put that pressure. I put that own expectation on myself. I put that own pressure on myself. That wasn't even like something from anyone else. That was something that I made up in my delusional little head when I was sitting there talking to myself one day, and then it just stuck. And now here we are doing something that we don't enjoy, or doing something like all of the things that like, I am a very guilty member of the party of like just sitting there and like talking myself in circles sometimes, like trying to make a decision. And, or at least I used to be. I feel like now I'm a very quick decision maker. Like if I've got a decision to make, typically it always cracks the people up in my lives of like, they're like, you make very monumental decisions very quickly. It's alarming. And I'm like, okay, for you, it was quickly, but I told you about this like an hour ago, and then maybe made the decision, I've been thinking about this for like 3 days, or like 3 years. And so
Yeah,
like
you
for
don't
me,
live
it
in
wasn't a
here.
quick decision. So like it's always been here. You're just late to the party. But then like even if they are quick decisions, I feel much more confident in making quick decisions because I trust myself. And like getting to that point of trusting yourself and trusting like that quick intuition of like, hey, like we're going to make this decision and we're going to go for it. Or like, hey, we need to make this pivot in our schedule, in our business, in our day. And you trust yourself that like that pivot was the correct pivot. That pivot was the one that like was meant for you, and that like you're not screwing anything up. And like getting to that point of just like truly trusting your decisions and trusting that like you are making the right decision. And you know what? It's okay to like have trust in that decision, but then also like look back in a week and be like, okay, that wasn't the right one. Like let's try it, and it doesn't work. That's okay too.
Yes, I think like, and what you're speaking to, I just like that like is right embedded in my little heart, because I think that's the overachiever. Like we have more capacity than the average person, so it seems like that decision happened really quick. But what it is like just honing these skills. Decision making is a skill, planning is a skill, capacity is a skill, consistency is a skill. And the more we work on these little things instead of like trying to find that check the right answer box, like that's how everything again becomes, you have more ease, more confidence, less getting, feeling overwhelmed and burnt out and out of control. It's just moving like really deliberately through these things, like one small thing at a time, and being willing to be wrong.
Yeah, no, all of that, every single thing. Oh my gosh, I just looked down and realized at what time we're at, and I'm like, I think that we could probably keep talking and make this
Good.
like Joe Rogan style and go for 3 hours, if we were given the opportunity to. But
Dude, would someone give us 3 hours to like, if you all would listen to us for 3 hours, I'm 100% sure we could like deliver on that.
oh, 1,000%. Like you just want to like marathon through and like we're gonna just spiel for 3 hours. We could do it. We would
We're
need some
just gonna
pee
pick up.
breaks, but
Here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna pick up, and then we'll tell you guys we're gonna do a Cowgirls Over Coffee episode, and then that way we can double up. Like we're just gonna play the system a little bit.
yes, exactly. No,
All
I
right, I'm
love
here
that.
for
And
that.
then like, hey, like check out part 2 over on
Yeah,
Cowgirls Over Coffee when that one launches.
we'll tell you what it'll be up. We'll tell you when and what it'll be about. We'll figure it out. You're here for the ride.
Exactly. Watch our socials. We'll do all of that later.
Yes.
But oh my gosh, no. I loved this. This was
Thank
so
you. Me
amazing.
too. Thanks
I
for
know
having
that this
me.
is not going to be your last time on this podcast. This was just
Okay.
so much fun.
I'm so glad I didn't worry about my welcome.
No, absolutely not. And I just like, for me, this was just such an amazing conversation to like remind me personally of like my own life and where I've come, where I've gone, all of the things. And like just kind of evaluate things like, okay, like this is something I need to do for myself. Like I'm going to come out of this conversation that we just had and like this is what I'm going to go do. And I know that every single person listening to this had to have gotten at least one thing from our conversation and all of just like the amazing things. So as we start to round this out, I don't want to end this conversation too abruptly. I want to so desperately hear what your piece of advice is that you would like to leave for the next generation of agriculture. No pressure.
This is such a good question. I love having like a good like cornerstone question. My biggest is you have time. You have space, take a breath, like whatever your goals are right now. And I feel like, do I go back to the ranch? Do I work on the operation? Do I find a career? Do I want to have kids? Like you have time. Just give yourself the actual physical time, slow down, take a breath, like that space, like take up as much time and space as you need. I think that is I spent so much time coming from a place of like must do, must do, must do, must do. Like I've always felt like the clock was just running out on like life or opportunities or decisions, right? And so like just breathe, because you have more time than you think you do. You've got the time and space, just take it.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I think that that
Well,
was like
thank you.
such a good like little ending blip to everything that we just talked about as like super high achievers. Kind of like for myself being like, you got time. Like
Just
take a breath.
breathe.
Just
Just
breathe.
breathe. Take a
We're
breath.
good.
Let it be quiet.
Yes.
You've got the
Oh,
time.
I love that. I love that
Thanks.
so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Thea. If everyone listening to this, if you loved this conversation as much as I did, head down to the show notes. I will have every single thing that we talked about linked today. So all of Thea's socials, all of that stuff, the Cowgirls Over Coffee podcast. Seriously, y'all go listen to it. It's so
Thank you.
fun. And like her podcast episodes are not nearly as long as ours over here. And they're really great snippets to start your mornings with or things like that. So go check out Thea's podcast. And then also make sure that you go check out that guide that we're going to have linked down below that Thea had mentioned earlier on in the podcast as well. And all of the things. So thank you, Thea.
Thank
And
you.
to all of you listeners out there, we will see you all next week on another episode of The Next Generation.